Max Gawn, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ from the Coaches Panel. Wow, what a week of footy we got to experience. There is so much for us to look, to listen, to discuss and dissect. Round one is in the rear vision mirror. 20 odd weeks to go in your fantasy footy season. You got MJ with you, joining me on this episode for his first in-season podcast. In fact, our first only in-season podcast, unless you're a Patreon. I got Kane on. Hello, buddy.
Hello, MJ. Oh, it's exciting to have it back, but it's also a little bit stressful, isn't it? We're into this rhythm now where we've got to be keeping up with all the news. We've got to be making decisions every week. I always feel like in the preseason, we all come across that moment where we're super into it. We make a bunch of changes. We sort of back off. And then obviously when we get the preseason games, we really dial it back up. But we're locked in now. We've only got anywhere between 2 and 3 trades to deal with per week for the rest of the year.
Yep.
So we sort of are what we are, but at the same time, there's a lot of room to shift things up. And I know a lot of people are super happy with their ranking and super upset at the scale.
Yeah.
A lot of footy to be played. And I guess that's what we're here to chat about, isn't it?
Yeah, it's exactly what we're going to dissect over this episode. And again, a massive thanks to our Patreons for their support over the preseason, in-season. They've been giving us a whole bunch of questions that we're going to get to throughout this episode. Of course, if you want to support the Coaches Panel, get some exclusive content for doing it as well, including a weekly round review podcast from me. You can find all the details for that, coachespanel.tv. But let's talk about round one, Kane. There was a lot of trends we saw in the preseason followed through, and those probably were 2 key ones: rucks and inside mids, pure inside mids and not much else. Didn't see that huge ceiling that we'd notoriously seen. And for the majority, there is always exceptions. For the majority, outside style players, running defenders, and intercept defenders all got a nice scoring bump. That's both a positive and a slightly alarming trend that we saw, that it was validated again across the round.
Yeah, it's really interesting, MJ. I guess if we start with the rucks, to have no ruck crack a DT ton is something I think is really, rare in general, not just in the last few years when we've had, the monsters, the Grundys and the Gawns in particular. We've seen, obviously guys like Tim English are on the rise. We've seen Riley O'Brien sort of come out of nowhere, but to have not one ruck rack up a ton, and for that top ruck to be Matthew Flynn, who I know a lot of people were not divided on having him in their squad of 30. I think he was almost a consensus pick across at least the community that we engage with on a regular basis. But the discussion was obviously, is he R2 or is he R3? That was obviously a big thing. So for first week to go, wow, this guy that's pretty much bargain basement to be the top scorer in the ruck line, wow. I think that shocked a lot of people. And I think obviously the stuff that when we talk rucks, we're not going to talk all of them for every club. We're really going to talk a few, and that is Gawn and Grundy being under par. I think if we start with Grundy, who played first.
Yeah, let's do that.
It was already a tough matchup, wasn't it, MJ? Steph Martin is the ruck equivalent of a tagger.
Yeah, he is.
So when you couple him with Tim English, who's super mobile, and they're sort of teaming up against you, you throw that into the mix as well, that Grundy's absolutely monstered the Dogs. So in terms of just crossing this off their list and having this guy who's been a bit of a bogey player behind them, it was all pointing to a really tough day for Grundy. You combine that with the Pies loss and the Bulldogs dominating possession of the ball. To be honest, you look at what he scored, especially in DT, MJ, you have to be bloody happy with it. Gawn was interesting. I was lucky enough to go to the footy, which was refreshing in amongst itself after what we dealt with last year. But it was alarming, MJ, as an owner, the way he was used structurally. He was on the ground plenty. And again, he did have a lot of, centre bounces and all that good stuff. From a SuperCoach point of view, Melbourne losing the first 9 clearances of the game didn't really help his score. And we know how much the SuperCoach, a good start really can set you up. Lachie Neale was the king of that, getting that good 40-point first quarter for him pretty much every week. You're on the way. But it was around the grounds that people noticed. He was playing full back. He was really taking that not just a kick from 50, which we know now with the kick-out rule, you can really clear that 50-metre arc quite comfortably.
Totally.
He was a kick behind the kick MJ. So the way Freo was moving the ball, it wasn't really getting to that zone too much. You know, they were struggling to take a mark inside 50, and in early part of the game, they could struggle to take a mark around the ground. So as much as Gawn was quite poor in what we expect, again, the way the game went, he did well late to get to the score he got to have a 90-odd in SuperCoach and that 70-odd score in DT. Like, while it's disappointing and a lot of people captained him, I think people are jumping at shadows with this Ruck trend, because both of those games, Grundy and Gawn in particular, they weren't optimum games for multiple reasons, whether it was opponent or just the way the game played out stylistically.
I think that's a really interesting point. Last year, again, not too many people want to rewind all that far back and look into 2020 for a variety of reasons. But let's look at Max Gawn just as an example, as an illustration. Round one, heading into 2020, before, again, 2020 had some different contrasts and compromises and issues through it. Round one, what did he score? 73 in DreamTeam and Fantasy, 93 in SuperCoach. Now, yes, shortened quarters waiting. So SuperCoach, same amount of points available per game. What did he do beyond that? Let's remind ourselves, let's not make the same mistakes, because this was the same narrative coming around round two. Oh no, Gawn's not going to be great. Oh no, it's not worth it. Oh no, maybe. And it's a maybe, because we don't know what the future holds, but maybe we can learn from the past. This is what he did the following just 5 or 6 weeks across the formats after footy returned post-COVID. 123. These are all non-adjusted scores in DreamTeam and Fantasy. 123, 99, 131, 105, 116, 103. Not adjusted, shortened quarters. Monster scores. SuperCoach, 184, 141, 163, 153, 185, 157. This is my concern, Kane. I think you've already picked it up beautifully. We spend these preseason days, weeks, months. If you're a coach's panelist, it's closer to months than the other two, probably. We have this perception, and this is what will be my season. And then reality hits in round one, and it will happen to a bunch of players. They underperform for whatever variable reason. They don't deliver like they did in the preseason. And we panic. We jump at shadows. Maybe even Jordan De Goey sits into that category. Maybe a Jake Lloyd jumps into that category. These guys we spend dollars on, expectations on. For some, it's even Josh Kelly. They've panicked at a 90-odd score across the format. What would you say to coaches that find themselves in that position right now, where premium underdelivers in round one? How do they know the difference between the jumping at shadow versus pivoting with something changing?
It's really interesting, MJ. And I think the last thing on Gawn, I think the other reason it was disappointing was, unlike Grundy, we thought the opponent was really friendly. And I can see people looking back to last year saying, well, a poor score against Nick Natanui is not uncommon. Whereas this year he had Lloyd Meek. I think it was an opportunity people thought to really feast. And I think it tipped a lot of people that were 50-50 on Gawn or Grundy towards the Gawn camp, that early fixture. It's interesting, MJ. Pretty much every player, bar maybe a couple a year, have what I would say a bad score is, maybe a sub 80 across. It's really funny though, isn't it, that when it gets to round 6, 10, 15, and let's say a Gawn, drops a 82 in DT and a 85 in SuperCoach, you just go, oh, well, it's okay. It's fine. The hard thing with round one is people want to extrapolate this out all the way now to be his whole season. And that's the problem. When it's in round 8 and you've seen Gawn go 130 for 2 months, you put up with the bad score. If you've had that score, where you've really got to keep faith and back in these guys that you believe. And again, one game should not sway your belief on someone like a Gawn or Grundy. It's just a bad score. And history would say that maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 for these guys with monster ceilings, they will have a stinker. But on the flip side, MJ, like we always say, if he's had a stinker and we still think he's going to average 130, the bad day's already gone. You've already popped it. As you always say, you've banked it. You can't do anything about it.
Exactly
The good
right.
scores could be on the way. So that's where I think if it's a super uber guy like Lloyd, like Grundy, like the Gawn, that you've picked in to really be a pillar, to even be that captaincy option, you have to just keep the faith and back in. I think the players that people not panic per se, but get nervous on is the breakout guys. I think those are the ones that cause a lot of stress early.
I think so. Hey, midway through this episode, it's been a while since we've had this lad join us on a podcast. We dropped the link. He thought, stuff it. I'm coming in to join the episode. For a long time, we haven't heard from this man. The reigning superstar, Fish, is on. Hello, mate. How are you?
G'day, boys. How are we all?
There we go. Mate,
Good to see.
Good to see you, Fish. Hear from you for those that can't see what we get to see. By the way, he's just as good as looking as you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen, listening to this episode. That's all you need to know. So we're talking about this ideology of pivoting and jumping and moving away from our rucks. What do we do? Not just with rucks, but with premiums. We see this underperforming score, so we jump away. But I suppose, Fish, maybe the opposite could be the same too. Like we see a Dustin Martin brain it for us in round one. Absolutely gives one of those big ceiling scores that we haven't seen all that often in DT or fantasy for a while. Are we doing the reverse and going, oh, he's killing it and jumping, and now we've missed that big one ceiling score for the year?
I suppose the big thing is that the chance is there that he does do it again this week, in particular against Hawthorn. They are a team that give up a lot of points. So, yeah, you may have missed that first one. And if you are going to jump to him, you really want that massive score again in at least the first couple of rounds to make it worthwhile making that jump. Dusty's probably one with the game that he plays and the lineup that he plays in that I think you could probably gather that he would be going pretty big again this week.
Yeah.
It's not too much of a hard one, I think, with him, with that forward line as well, because we just really don't know who the guys are that are going to end up in that top six there. There's just so many spots available. He's probably one of the very few that you could say, yep, you know what, I'm going to ride him and that's it.
And now we find ourselves in a position, Kane, where arguably one of, if not the most likely to be the top performing forward across the formats, Patrick Dangerfield, out for 3 weeks. Before we look at who are the trade options, and Fish, you've already alluded that Dusty's probably one of the more secure ones we could look at. Could you try to convince someone, Kane, on a world of is there a world where we should be looking to hold him at all, or regardless of the format you play because it's 3 weeks? Is there a world we should keep him at all?
I think you can definitely look into it. And it wasn't something that naturally came out to me. I was pretty much thinking, who am I going to go to straight away? But the more I thought about it, the more I chatted to other people, getting more information when we've just come to these new rule changes and we've just come off a season that was like no other. And we know that scoring and pricing was so different last year that it's left us in this weird position where there might be some guys that are super overpriced and also some that are really undervalued. So having more information, waiting that week, especially while we've got plenty of players on the bench. Now, the really frustrating thing is that Dangerfield's playing on Friday night and we don't really have any rookies. Maybe a Paddy Dow is someone that you could put an emergency on the bench and roll through there. But really, you're probably putting on a Anthony Scott, you're putting on maybe a Brockman, you may be putting on a McNeil, someone that you probably don't have a lot of confidence in. So you're probably going to be losing anywhere between, could be up to 80 points at worst. If he has a decent game, maybe it's only as low as 30 to maybe a Dustin Martin. Fish, as Fitch mentioned, he's got an awesome game against Hawthorn matchup-wise. So I think the only reason you wouldn't do it is for data. You want more information. And really, if you do make a more informed choice, those 80 points over more than 20 rounds, like you can chew that up in a heartbeat. So personally, I'm more inclined to trade, move on. I think the other risk with carrying someone is if something happens next week, you've got a guy that's a zero, you've got a guy that's a lot of cash sitting on the pine, and you just never know in this season. You lose a couple of rookies, you can be staring down something a little bit more menacing. So I sort of prefer to just patch it up when I've got it. Same with Rowell, and just move on and keep those dollars on the field.
All right, fair enough. Well, Fish, help me out. Dusty's obviously, it feels like the no-brainer move in SuperCoach. If you're not one of the 50% of owners that have him in that format, it feels like premium forward to premium forward, job done. Everybody's happy. If you are a Dusty owner, or for whatever reason you've got an objection to picking him, we'll pray for you later. I don't know why that's the case, but who are the players that we should be considering in just a pure forward line maneuver if you're needing to go and get a cover option for Danger?
Yeah, I suppose as we've said, Dusty is one of them there. Dunkley, obviously, their preseason game last week, just got a heap of the ball, was around the ball a lot, loves to tackle and just picked up his points there. We were a little bit concerned, and probably there still are a few question marks with that Bulldogs midfield as to how that is going to end up, say a month or so from now. But at the moment, it looks like Dunkley's going to be a very safe choice as well. We saw guys on that second line like Tom Phillips didn't quite hit the numbers that everyone was looking at the preseason, but at the same time, you guys have alluded to that was always going to be the case. He wasn't going to have that midfield role. I think he attended 2 centre bounces or something, roughly, but still put out, a 90 or whatever it was in real DreamTeam and SuperCoach. So he is still someone I think that this new rules will suit because he just runs and runs and runs and runs all day. He gets the ball. They're going to be wanting it. He's not going to be stopping, so you can look at him. Jai Caldwell, another sort of one of those cheaper type guys, was in everything for Essendon. I was a bit surprised, obviously, watching the game live, and then, he obviously hit the ton in DreamTeam, but the SuperCoach points weren't there for him. That might just be one of those things that occasionally happens. And then you go through, I think, Jaden Stevenson's probably a guy that's on the lips of everyone this week. But when we do talk about, and this is what I think Kane's saying in terms of data and what you can trust, do you really want to be trading to a guy that at the very least next week could pump out a 60?
Yeah.
Kangaroo's midfield has come back. Does he still have that midfield role where he's running a muck? He's probably one guy that has a bit of pace in that midfield. So is he going to be someone that they sit on? That's the key thing that you've got to look at there. And I think the other thing with him as well is you can trade into him with your buy structure and everything, making it easy. But is he going to be a stepping stone to a true premium? And if that's the case, then his buy is terrible. You probably want to stay away from him because you've got to get rid of him before that anyway. Or, do you just go for the pure out and out premium in that forward line, which those other guys like we mentioned?
Yeah, it's a good call. So, Kane, every format requires a different strategy and a different structure. So you're a Dangerfield owner. Stevenson feels like the hot pot pick at the moment, that it's I can get him, I can fix up a line issue elsewhere, or I can stash some cash or whatever you want to do. Talk me through the formats with Stevenson, because Fish just beautifully nailed a bunch of guys through that forward line we can pick across formats. But narrowing on an AFL fantasy with Stevenson specifically, and then those other formats, is he the right pick? Is he the burn pick? What's your take on Stevenson?
He's definitely a defensive pick, MJ, because everyone's going him. So I think there's a few things that are really attractive to people for Stevenson. The first one's the narrative. New club, we love new club. We so many guys have come to a new club and taken their game from good to great. You think about Tom Mitchell, Dangerfield, the list goes on. We love that. We love a new role. But there's the narratives that Stevenson's never spent any time outside of the Ford 50 in his life. If you listen to some of that chat about his time at Collingwood, he's got a new role as well. The ceiling is big. For what we saw in that round, for a Ford to get over 120 and nearly touch 130.
Yeah.
And now, as Fish mentioned, we've got the rules. Fast, very fit, especially if you saw any of his junior footy. He's played that role in juniors. He was a guy that could kick 5 on the wing and really carve it up. He also spent some time on the inside mid for Eastern Rangers, and he was in that team since he was 16 years old. So this is a guy that does know his way around the midfield. My major worry is the cattle that's coming back in. When you couple in Dumont, who's already said that he's going to play that winger role, did it last year, very good at it, very industrious type of guy.
Yeah.
You throw in Cunnington and Anderson, pure inside mid types. Dom Tyson is the one, top of my head, could be probably coming out, but you've also got Davies Uniacke and Simpkin that really did a really good job in there. We know that Stevenson got a couple of CBAs, but just from a ball movement point of view, is he really going to have the luxury to go big for me, it feels like if it's a defensive move, it's probably a 2 to 3 weeker. The fixture does get a little bit trickier after that as well. Again, Gold Coast this week, but after that, you see the Bulldogs on the horizon.
Yeah,
You have the Cats not too far away either. So we know when they're playing the game style they want to play with their midfields, they can be quite possessive with the ball.
Yeah.
So for me, I just don't see him ever reaching that premium mark, which maybe at his price is a 90, especially when I haven't seen it with those other mids. So for me, he's probably an AFL fantasy play only.
Yeah.
And even with that, I want to be having an exit strategy in 2 to 3 weeks, which we know in that format's a lot easier said than done, because one other thing pops up and he's in your team, like Fish said, all the way to the bye. And what do you do with him then? So that's right at this stage.
Yeah, because I think he's that interesting player that you bring up, that fascinating point, Kane, about how you can unintentionally get stuck with these guys that aren't performing bad enough for you to force a trade quickly, but they're also not justifying enough of a reason to upgrade with urgency. And so he might be floating quite possibly around that 75 to 80 marker for the next 3 weeks. He'll still generate your 50 odd K in that format of the game. But as we've seen this week, you can end up with a double or even a triple injury curse. Rowell owners, Dangerfield owners, a smaller percentage, but Harms owners. All of a sudden, that plan you might have had on Saturday afternoon of, right, I'm going to get Sam Walsh, or what I saw from Dusty. Dusty's my target. I'm going to make this. Or, I made the wrong cash cow selection, so I'm going to go and get James Jordan. I missed him. Well, now all of a sudden, you might not be in a position to be able to get him this week because things happen in the game. And Fish, you've won a format before in this game and you understand luck's an element of it, but how important is good planning with the data and the information we have to be able to succeed in our overall strategies?
I think that's, exactly where Kane has said before in terms of it, that the hardest thing with Danger this week is moving him on. You're doing it based on one game with completely new rules, completely new teams, limited pre-season that we've had for the players. And there's just so many factors that come into it there. Ultimately, if you can't have that data, you can't make an informed decision. And then you probably got to wonder, well, why weren't these other guys in my team in the first place?
Yeah, good call.
And that's where that decision then comes back to. If you can't guarantee they're going to be in that top, we always say about the top percentage in their line, in the forward line, you want them to be in that sort of top 5 if you're moving them in this early. I think the biggest thing with it, planning, is that you need to have some idea. We don't know where, fixtures are heading, what type of breaks are going to be coming, how this sub rule is going to impact things. What the teams are doing, as we're saying, with the limited preseason, with the faster games, are there going to be players getting injured more often? Is this going to be something that we're going to have to be looking at? So, without all of that data, this call, you've got to make the right call. And for 1 week to wait on it, it might work. If you go with Stevenson, why can't you trust one of those guys on your bench for 1 week? The biggest problem with your Stevenson is everything that we've seen with him. He could be the type of player that pumps out a 30 or 40 this week. And by then you've wasted a trade, you're stuck with someone. So there's something like that with such a risky pick in the limited trade formats. He's probably one that you definitely have to stay away from because you don't have the data there. On the flip side of that, the likes of, your Dusties, your Dunkleys, they've got history. You know what they can do. They've done it for a period of time. It's probably a little bit different with the data for those guys.
The thing, MJ, that I will say that's so appealing about those moves is these are the moves that can put you ahead of the pack and on for a massive season. Like if you were quick to react to a Petrarca last year when you missed him, if you were quick to react to a Boak in previous years or a Simpkin, especially those forwards that you get that midfield clock. And while it's not our typical inside mid clock for Stevenson, it is a clearly different role. So I think that's what everyone's chasing. They're chasing that guy that at this point, it's the Jordan Ridley of last year. It's that premium player that you're getting anywhere from 150, 200K underpriced. And you're not only getting them underpriced, you're getting good points from them because they're matching or if not bettering a lot of the best premiums. So I totally get the logic. It's just at this stage, with all the information I have, I don't have that sort of lean. I don't have that sort of thing where I'm thinking, I saw Petrarca last year dominate the preseason. I wanted him in my team. I went a 50-50 otherwise. I've seen the roll in around one game. I'm making the move. I don't quite feel that strongly. Maybe Caldwell in terms of a role
Sure.
has it, but at the same time, he's still so young, new club. And again, it's a good matchup against Hawthorn for the most part. Like, do I really think he's top 6? For me, not at this stage. Would I be totally shocked if he was? No, because he's a really good kid.
Yeah.
But I do get people wanting to chase it because it has a massive reward if you find that right guy.
That's that fascinating thing. And again, some coaches find themselves with a felt 2 forced trades this week. And I say felt because there are some in the community that are really happy to hold Danger for the 3 weeks, hope they get rookie roulette going their way, give themselves a vice captaincy loophole. Again, I wrote about this at coachespanel.tv today, where they just go, I'm going to get 3 weeks of a safe vice captain. I might get an extra rookie on the ground, and the points gap might be 100 points over a 3-week period of time, but I've now got a unique premium who's capable of being the top. So that's some of the reason why I might hold. You've heard a little bit about some of the reasons for players and targets and options. But again, then you've got a Matt Rowell who coaches have to decide. Could Fish some of the ideas that Kane's talking about, this guy that's an underpriced option in Stevenson, could, if someone's in that similar position where they've got a Rowell and a Dangerfield to move on, could they use a similar mindset approach of, well, I'll take Dangerfield down to a Stevenson who's my stepping stone type, which is what I thought Rowell would be, and I'll turn a Rowell up to a McRae or a Mitchell or something like that I've missed. Is that a right mindset, or is there some flaws in that logic too?
I think, you're always looking to improve the team. So regardless of whether the trades that you're making, whether you're trying to jump on someone to make cash, whether you're jumping on someone to bring in points. Yep. So whether it's Rowell or Dangerfield that you do that to, I think the difference when you look at Matty Rowell, so if you only have him to deal with alone, is he doesn't quite have that fat in him. We've bought him in if you have, because he's underpriced. He was cheap for what we thought he was going to put out there. And as a result of that, though, it limits the options that you have in terms of when you're going to go and get him and what you're going to do with him. You're not going to get too many premium mids in case you were someone that maybe didn't jump on a Taranto at the start, who we've seen before can score at that rate that puts him in sort of that, maybe not the uber mids, but in that next tier of mids. But if you do have him already, you're probably pretty limited with Rowell in terms of what you can do. So, if you've got Danger and Rowell together, then by all means, I think getting the 2 of those guys and actually making something out of that and trying to get, at the very least, an absolute top tier midfielder from those 2. And then with the change left over, you do something with Danger. And that can be, with DPP nowadays, and most people have set their team up that way, you can make some pretty significant moves and probably pick up, all the data. We talk about data, but everything seems to show so far that those guys in the back lines, most people are sort of tailoring their teams around them. So if you're someone that's got still 1 rookie on your field in your back line, these are perfect opportunities to start to maneuver that around and maximize your points there using these 2 guys to pick up an absolute gun and then someone that's ready to pop.
Yeah, it's a really great point, isn't it, Fish? It's not just going, okay, I can move a Danger and a Rowell. Well, go get your McRae's if you were bullish on wanting him, but just couldn't squeeze him in. Now you might have realized, I can have more faith in a rookies in a specific line that I didn't realize. Maybe you had James Rowe, for example, on your bench, and now you're like, Scott's okay. Harrison Jones, he's okay. Like, I can deal with a 50 out of those guys there, but I wasn't happy with that delivery of a cash cow line. I realized that restructuring. That's the benefit of these injuries for us, isn't it, Kane? Is it gives opportunity that maybe we might be a bit more hesitant to go for, especially in SuperCoach and Dream Team with limited trades. It opens up that opportunity of, now's my opportunity to address and get those backline premiums that I missed, to fix that extra captaincy option through the midfield. That's the positive opportunity of injuries and long-term suspensions.
Yeah, and I think the other guy that will probably be on people's chopping block for that reason, and it's mainly people with Rowell only, is you start coming into your Jordan Clarks, maybe your Joe Danaher's if someone went him, guys that you think, if I restructure here, if you took Jordan Clark down to, just say you miss a James Jordan or maybe you miss a James Rowe, like that's awfully tempting to take what really is 2 mid-price guys. Obviously, Rowell's on the higher end and you maybe had aspirations for him being a keeper. and maybe you're taking Jordan Clark the stepping stone down, all of a sudden that restructure can probably get you another really good mid, another really good forward, and also that rookie that you want. So I think a lot of people with Rowell will be really looking at that move just to get the cash, because like you said, there's not much to shop with when you're dealing with Rowell, just due to the price we got him at. And obviously, like we said, the aspirations we had for him due to that injured game. So I think Jordan Clark, again, as I said, Danaher, even Paddy Dow, I could see some people going, I've got 70, 80K to take them down to that rookie, and I can act something with Rowell. So it's frustrating because you're burning 2 trades just for the restructure. You'd love to take Rowell to a guy, again, if you've got enormous faith in Stevenson, by all means, do it. But I think a lot of people will feel safer getting that really solid premium, even if it means sacrificing a mid-pricer.
Yeah, no, I like that. There's a player that's getting talked about a little bit in the AFL fantasy community, but not getting much communication or perspective across the other formats. And I'm keen on both of your takes on him. Nice break even in AFL fantasy. Still got a little bit of time for that to change in SuperCoach and Dream Team with the 3-week price cycle changes. Oleg Markov is a really interesting player for me. Nick Hind, you could probably put in that category too, where Stevenson's the go-to guy that we're talking about that's got friendly break-even, friendly roll, things like that. I'm not hearing as much about those two fish. Talk to me about Markov, because last week he came off a game where he had 17 kicks, 20 possessions, 14 marks. He was one of 3 Gold Coast defenders. It was Lukosius, Bowes, and Markov that were just kicking the ball in the back line to each other. What do we do with a player like that? Is he in that same sort of conversation of Stevenson where it's not enough, but it's a good stretch? Like, what do we do with Oleg Markov?
Yeah, I mean, he certainly seems to be a play in AF this week, that's for sure. But the price is there. It's very tempting. As we're saying, with the DPP action, it is quite easy to get someone like that into your team this week. And talk about players changing clubs, players actually getting an opportunity, players getting a role, someone that's come out of that Richmond club and culture and just could not squeeze in there. I mean, you've got guys like Basher Hooley and Jaden Short sitting in front of him in the queue there. So it's very hard for him to get it. But, as Kane mentioned before, we're looking for these guys with these new rules that can run. An athlete that can run, and he's certainly that. They obviously like to have the ball in his hands, and there is a move as well. Obviously, the Suns have done it a little bit. They're playing a possession game in that back half where they're trying to keep control of the ball. And he's certainly a guy for them that is found a lot of it in that first round, and obviously the preseason as well. So Markov, I think the harder thing that you look at in the other formats is if you stretch just that little bit more from him, there are other options, that are probably a bit safer. Your Hunter Clarks and even your Zach Williams and those types of guys, which are going to have midfield type roles. Whereas Markov, so much of what he is going to do is going to be that kick mark in the back line for him to score. He doesn't have the safety of the midfield role. But he certainly does have at the moment a role for what his price is, where the numbers will flow.
I'm curious, and again, we'll talk about Hind in a second with you, Kane. I'm curious, Fish, what weighting do you put as a fantasy player on the meters gained stats? The reason I bring this up is if we look at those kind of 3 Gold Coast defenders that I alluded to in Markov, Lukosius, and Bowes, his meters gained is incredibly different compared to those players. So Bowes, huge score, 100% disposal efficiency. Everybody just absolutely lost their nanas about that. But he had a meters gained of 607, pretty handy. Lukosius, again, tons across the formats, has a meters gained of 787. Well, even with that 17 kicks, 20 possessions, 14 marks, it was only 224 meters gained for Markov. Is that a stat line we should pay some level of attention to when considering a player like him, or is it not his game, not his problem?
Well, it's probably, when you look at it, I mean, the AFL coaches necessarily aren't going to be as worried about guys like that, where they're, I suppose, if they're not carrying and running and creating lines, those type of players tend to be ones that the actual coaches will leave alone. As opposed to these other guys where they are someone like a Lacostis in particular with the role that he's playing where, he was probably starting as a tall forward, then he started to run down back. They're now using him as a link up through the midfield. And he's an amazing kick of the football as well, that's for sure. So while he may not be that stereotypical sort of midfielder / wingman, he's a guy that just has ended up there. He might be someone that they are a little bit more worried about than your Markov, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's good. Talk to me about Nick Hind, Kane. Again, more popular in AFL fantasy. I think part of the reason isn't just his price point, but also the likely future DPP that will come at the end of round 5 with that clear, distinct halfback role. Is he again another viable option for us to look at as a sideways downgrade potential maneuver for us this week?
It's really funny, MJ. The ones we're all speaking about for AFL fantasy is Stevenson, Hind, Caldwell, and Markov. And again, all at new clubs, all in pretty much different roles. Markov, not so much a role, but obviously, as Fish said, the opportunity is just chalk and cheese to what he had at Richmond.
Yeah.
Hind's a really interesting one. Again, he's more on that meters gain side with his run and carry. And also, not only new club, but what went out the door. When you lose McKenna and Sard, who played that role, and even Fantasia when he was in the last few years was actually moved across us back for that pace. So Essendon really value that clearly, and what he delivered was impressive. It was a pretty all-round game for a halfback to have 25 touches, 6 marks, 4 tackles. You really can't ask too much more. I think when I look at the flip side of that does that seem to be a sustainable type of score, or even getting within maybe 15 points of that? Because that's about as good a game as I could ever expect from a Nick Hind, and he just touched the ton. So again, I think he's an AF play, that short term, get on him, get off. Matchups don't excite me as much as a Markov. A Markov playing in North Melbourne at home when there's this clear, possession strategy with, 5 defenders having 10 plus marks. Like, I think when we have that coupled with the preseason where we saw, marks everywhere. We had Will Power 12 and we had another 6 guys have 7 plus. So that's 2 games of a clear strategy. And if you watch them play, they didn't want to turn it over. They wanted to chip it back, retain possession, and reduce the time in a game where someone can score. And we saw that, talked about Fremantle last year. The games were so short and the defense was so good, they could keep themselves in it and try to jag the win late. And I feel like Gold Coast is almost taking that approach where it's like a soccer team. We're not going to turn it over. We're happy to possess it, chip it back and forth. And I think it's that trend that is going to continue at least in the immediate term. So back on Hind, I don't see the Bombers doing that. When I look at their score again on the weekend against Hawthorn, 6 marks was the most that a Essendon player took against Hawthorn. So I don't see that sort of kick mark game. So for me, I just think Hind was great, but again, to think it's sustainable enough more than a 2-3 week burst, I think is risky. So in the pecking order, he's probably 4th for mine out of that Stevenson, Markov and Caldwell all ahead of him. I think Caldwell might have the most likelihood to be a keeper. But again, those other 2 guys in Markov and Stevenson are cheaper prices than Caldwell and had bigger scores.
We saw such a big fluctuation in scores last week, and it's going to happen for the next 5 to 6 weeks, where so many of our teams are still very cash cow dependent on the field, and that, along with our captaincy choices, probably are the 2 most defining factors to whether or not we got a 2,000, 2,200, 2,300 in SuperCoach, or whether he got a 1,800, 1,900, or hit that 2,000 marker in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. Rookie Roulette's going to be a part of it. The gap of points between a Bergman and a Rowe was 30 points odd in Dream Team and Fantasy, 50 odd points in SuperCoach. Similarly, you might have gone, I'm putting Goulden on the bench and I'm trusting Braden Campbell. That's about a 50 point or 100 point turnaround, depending on the format that you play. Fish, how do you make sure, as best you can, you win Rookie Roulette? Is there a surefire way to help ourselves not get caught in this, I could have got 20 points here, 30 points here, 80 points there?
I think the big thing is that you have to win it in round 1. In round 2, you probably find that it's not as big of an issue because people will tend to follow last week's score. So, you look at that last week. I mean, I was one that started Bergman over Rowe in all formats.
Yep.
And this week, you would look at it and say, rightio, well, I might start Rowell on my field based on the points. But that's the thing, that you pretty much can guarantee that all of those people that made that decision last week will reverse it and start Rowell on the field this week. So you've then got to have a look at it and think, well, hang on a second, what happened here? The Crows were up and about. They were, running all day. James Rowe got his goals, he got his touches, he pulled out the 80. Is that same thing going to happen this week? And that's where you then have to start to think about it. So while the vast majority will be going Rowe, you've got to be smart about it then and say, just using this as the case study. Well, is that going to happen this week? And if it's not, then you back yourself in. You can play the safe way and you can get the same points as probably 80% of the people that will start him on the field for the next week that didn't the week before.
Yeah.
But you've just sometimes got to go with your gut with the way that those matchups are. You did it in round 1, so why not do it in round 2? If you want to play the safe way, then that's the way that you go about it. But that's the thing. I think it's much harder to win rookie roulette in rounds 2, 3, and 4 anyway, because most people are doing the same type of thing. So for you to do it, you've got to be really strong in your convictions as to why you're going to do what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And actually just go ahead. And if it doesn't come off, it doesn't come off. But just keep going ahead with that on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, and I think, Kane, go for it, man.
Oh, MJ, how many times would you have picked a Adelaide player against Geelong? The most restrictive,
an Adelaide forward
possessive team
against Geelong.
And again, exactly. So, and then on the flip side, you had Miles Bergman, who'd shown in the preseason that he can score. He's got a nice role, and he's playing North Melbourne under the roof. Like everything was pointing to Port get a nice win. There's some nice kick mark for the first gamer. Let's send him off on a nice way with a few late touches. So you can't beat yourself up. Like Fish said, you made that decision. You chose in this instance Bergman over Rowe.
Yeah.
Again, reassess this week. Like you look at, Adelaide's got Sydney. We're using this example still. Sydney were really good. Is that a tough matchup? As Fish said again, is he going to kick his goals? Like that's always the thing with the forward that's really tricky. Bergman's got Essendon. Again, Will Day had a really good score for the Hawks. Like, is this a matchup? Is Bergman just going to be better up first game? Because I always come back to MJ is, and it's not a knock on the guy, but it just is what I always think of. It's Bailey Scott.
Yeah.
That first round when Bailey Scott debuted and he looked $1 million. I think he had a 90 in DT and 100 in SuperCoach. And there were so many rookies that year that people were clamoring to get Bailey Scott in after round 1.
That's right.
We've just moved heaven and earth. And he came out, I've just pulled it up. He came out and scored a 30 in DT and a 24 in SuperCoach.
I remember that.
And then the next week, I think he played with Gastro, had 46 and a 48. Didn't play the next week, scored a 40 in both formats, and was not seen again for the rest of the year from round 6 and beyond. So one game does not make a rookie, even if that game was sensational. Like Bailey Scott, 21 touches, 8 marks, 2 goals. Like, how good is that? Right. But it was one game. You have to reassess. And I think, like Fisher, you have to just back yourself. If you think Port's going to win, if you think Bergman's going to be better second up, if you don't think Rowe's going to get his goals, just back it in. Don't just be chasing those points because they scored it last week. There's no guarantee of that. So, as you said, round 1's the round where you make those big gains on people. You have those lucky breaks. You have those Gordons over Campbells, those Rowe over Bergmans. Everyone really does just follow what happened last week. But again, on the flip side, there's points to be gained if you do go against it. That's what this game's all about.
Yeah, it's true. And look, the most important thing with rookie roulette is you have them. The points on field matter. Absolutely they do. But why do you have a cash cow? To generate income, nothing more. And points are just a nice little side benefit there. All you're trying to do is move them out of your side as quickly as you can at the max priced potential. You're not worried about whether they drop a 50 or a 46, I think, Campbell. Are you worried about, is that your biggest concern this week? Gosh, maybe your bigger concern could be, I didn't like the score of a Jordan De Goey. And that's a question we'll get to him in a second. Maybe that's the bigger concern you should be considering? Or, oh, Jake Lloyd didn't look anywhere near it this week. Now, was that the game style? Was that the weather? Was it like, if you're worried about your cash cow on field, I think your team's doing just fine. You're in a good position. If they're your biggest problems of winning rookie roulette, you're in a sweet spot for the rest of the year. Rather, it might be some underperforming premiums. They're the ones you should be more concerned about than that. All right, let's get to some of these cash cow premium questions that we've got from a bunch of different Patreons. Of course, if you want to join that Patreon supporter group, you can. Coachespanel.tv, all the links. Let's talk about him. Sriram has asked that question about Jordan De Goey. Fish, I'll throw it over to you. Was it just a bad score in the setting of the game, or should there be some alarm bells for Jordan De Goey owners?
Never alarm bells after one game, unless, things are just completely out of your control in terms of the role. I mean, he played pretty much what people had said he was going to play in the preseason. He just didn't get the ball like we've seen other clubs use their stars. And that's the thing, these guys, which are there, realistically, he's probably getting close to Collingwood's, hate to use the term, but marquee player. He's the one that they see themselves building that / forward line midfield around, like your Dusties, like your Petrarcas at Melbourne. He's the one that they want to take that next step. So from one game, I don't think the alarm bells are there. You look at the matchups like we spoke about. I mean, they got smashed around the ball by that Bulldogs midfield, who will probably catch up quite a lot of midfields this year. Going forward, when he was there, he wasn't used like, say, a Richmond use at Dusty down there, where they just try to funnel everything through him. So I think there is, and we said it before, everything's about data. You've picked this guy because of all the noise that's come out of pre-season. You've picked him on the basis of that natural improvement, the pickup in fitness, the role that he's going to play. I think at the very least, you sit with him for this week, have a look at it again this week. And you know what? If he's your only problem next week, you make a call on it next week. But going forward, playing who they're going to be playing, got to give him another week to have a look at, and then you can see from there. And I think the other thing to take into consideration with him is he does have, the early game in the week as well. So you can have a look at him, you can see what he's going to do. And like we say, you always want to be thinking forward to next week, what you're going to be doing. So we're on the opposite side of it. Danger's got the early game, and it makes it very hard to make that call. At least De Goey is up and away early. And if he's terrible and he stinks and you want to get rid of him, then you can start to look at what you're going to do next week. But I think, I don't own him, but I think if I did, I think he'd still be in your team next week regardless.
Yeah, nice thoughts. Craig wants to know, Kane, it's a SuperCoach question. What's your thoughts on Jack Bowes? His role seems to be good as the core distributor out of the back line. He's considering using some DPP when trading out of Matt Rowell. What do you think about that move?
I'd love to see Bowes use it a bit better, MJ, after you mentioned he wanted 100%. So we'll start there. I just think the bar is so high in these defenders. Like, I don't even know when we'll get Lockie Whitfield back, if we can even plan to have him at any stage. But you look at some of the guys that are going around: Lloyd, Laird, Stewart, Short, Doherty, Mills with this midfield role, Caleb Daniel. Like, we're already well past 6. So I just think if these guys are all, and Zach Williams is going to make his debut. Yeah. If these guys are all, in my estimations, 95 plus, I just find it hard for Bowes to scale those same heights. I know it's awfully tempting off a massive score, but my mind immediately goes to, I've missed a massive score. If I've got him going 100 for the season, like, that's a 98 with what he's already delivered. So for me, it would be a fun play in AF, maybe, but really, he's too much for a stepping stone. You're picking him to keep him for the year, or at least in AFL Fantasy for the bulk of the season. If you love him, if you just can't go another week not having him in your side, by all means. But I think that back line's stacked, so I'd be looking somewhere else a bit more proven.
I like it. Paul Erickson wants to know, Fish, is it just too simplistic to go Danger to Dusty? I know we talked about him earlier at the episode. Or is it better to chase the cash in the forward line and then use that amount of salary cap to maybe improve your team elsewhere? What do you reckon?
So
Fish?
we're looking at whether we use just one trade for pretty much a top 3 to 5 forwards. Just trade and move on and get that trade done pretty much before the Cats play. If you've got the likes in the other formats, I think you can have a bit of a look around. Certainly in an AF, there is a little bit of value to play with, as there's names we've mentioned before. And the beauty of AF is the 2 trades a week, you use them or lose them. So you have to make that trade. And then you can use that remaining cash that's there from going to someone with a lot of fat in them to upgrade another line. Real dream team, I still think Dusty is going to be one of the top forwards, but I'm not as keen on him in that format as I am in SuperCoach. So look, in a nutshell, SuperCoach, yep, just make the trade and move on. The other 2 formats, it really does depend on what else is happening elsewhere in your team. And I think the other formats, because it is so easy to pick that top tier of defenders in particular in your real dream team, Danger can possibly become someone there, can become someone in your midfield. There's just too many other options just to say move it to Dusty and real dream team.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really interesting call. We'll throw the last question over to you, Kane, because a lot of them are, what should I do with Dangerfield questions? What should I do with Rowell questions? What should I do with my Ruck questions?
Understandable too, MJ.
Understandable
Sort of
too,
a
given they're the
popular
big
player,
issues of the week. Here's the one last one that I want to throw out to you. It starts with Rowell and Dangerfield, opens up a little bit more.
Okay.
SuperCoach.
I'll jot this down.
Yeah, that's it. That's right. Yeah, it's not trade radio where there's 16 clubs available. No. It's not you doing trade radio.
I've got a 28 club trade.
I've got 28 clubs, 72 players moving, and the club I support gets all the good players. It's not one of those.
Yeah.
Don't pay.
And
Here
North
it is.
Melbourne to Tassie.
It's a SuperCoach question. He's a Rowell and Dangerfield owner. He's happy to trade them both. His question is this though: am I better to go off and getting in guys like the Dusties, the Stevensons, the whoever he's decided? Is that the right focus for him? Or should his focus be getting the cash cows that he's missed, like a James Jordan and James Rowe? What should be his focus? He's got injured premiums or hoped premiums in Rowell, and he's got missed cows. He's got 2 big problems. What does he do?
I'd definitely be moving primo to primo with that crew, Rowell and Dangerfield. Obviously, we spoke at length about some of the various options you can have. First on Jordan. At halftime, Jordan was on 70 in the formats, and he finished on 78 in low 80s. So you think about that. He had a really good half, a sensational half, a half that we'd be happy with from our premiums. But he also scored about 10 to 15 points in the second. So unfortunately, there's nothing to say, like I mentioned about Scott, that Jordan's not a 30 to 40 guy last week. Again, he kicked some goals. He was laying tackles left, right, and centre. So I guess the point I'm making is I don't think we know who the cash cows are we have to have. Again, maybe Gordon, I think, has maybe probably cleared that. Mainly because for me, the job security's off the charts. I think Rose got pretty good job security with everything that's going on at Adelaide in that small forward department. I think he's cleared that void.
Yeah.
But, Jack Viney's coming back into that Melbourne team. I know James Harms has just gone out, but really what Harms is doing isn't really what Jordan was doing. Jordan really is sort of another inside bull. Really, that's his skill set. So definitely keep the cash on the field. You got 2 big primos. Get that back going. Whatever your 2 primos are you like, put that on the field. And you've always got next week. I think we've got to remind people that last year we had to make this call after one round because prices were going to change. We're back to the old school. We've got 2 full games to look at. Again, data's probably the one takeaway from this pod, but having that extra week, especially on these rookies, and it's not just for scoring power, it's are they in their team side? We were worried about a Tommy Highmore. Harry Sharp was a surprise. Bergman made it in. But players coming in and out of these sides, left, right, and centre, especially in the early part of the season, there's nothing worse than spending this trade because you think it's a cash cow you need. And, them getting dropped and obviously, frustratingly, them getting injured, which can happen. So give it as much time as possible. Got injured the next week, you're going to get some price rise in the game. Would it be the whole whack of cash you wanted? No, but at least it's something. So get the primos. You got another week to look at 2 cows. If you need more than 2 cows next week because you missed a bunch, well, guess what? You might just have to pay up 50, 60K if you really, really want them. And we know, MJ, seasons aren't broken if you do that. That's more than okay. That's happened to a lot of people in the past, and they've had ripping seasons.
50, 60K. Yeah, go fish.
Just one other one with those cows is the problem with teams being named the way that they are now as well, is if you are trying to get these cows and nail them down, you might have to make that call, and then they could very well, as we've seen last week, Connor Downey, who was named to be debuting, everyone thinking he was in the team, the teams were announced. So if you got that information on a, say, Friday afternoon, and you move to that, he could the cash cow that you bring in that you deem to be the must-have cash cow could end up being the sub and not play at all for that game, which is great because then there's no price change. But he, at the same time, might get 5 minutes at the end of a game, regardless of what happens. So just reinforcing that point Kane has just made.
That's a great point, Fish. That's such a scary proposition, isn't it?
Well, you've got that option, and these guys, and we're saying about data for these other premiums is data that we've based on years. You're making calls on a rookie after one game. If everything that we've said, the likes of Kane talking about Bailey Scott, and then the rule changes and the sub calls and the teams being named the day before now, the best thing that you can do is just give yourself as much of a chance as possible to nail that rookie call. So that's one more week at least for those ones.
Yeah, I like that, boys. What some absolute nuggets of gold you've dropped for the fantasy footy community that listen to this episode. You're going to help out a bunch of people with some of those sorts. Kane, mate, is always a pleasure. Thanks for dropping by.
No problem, MJ. Pleasure as always.
And speaking of dropping by, Fish just sends a message mid-episode recording going, lads, I'm free. Do you want in? 2 minutes later, he pops in, mate. An absolute pleasure.
Busy boy, mate. That's the way it goes. But no, it was good to be back on board. Cheers, boys.
If you want to go and check out this episode again, or any of the other future episodes that have come, you can go and make sure you subscribe via Google Podcasts, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts to be able to go get these episodes. Of course, articles dropping all the time at coachespanel.tv that are going to help you make the big decisions you're going to make for your fantasy footy sides. And you can join our Patreon supporter group where there is exclusive groups to join, access to podcasts, articles, and a bunch of other stuff that you just don't get anywhere else but our Patreon friends, they do. Look, good luck heading into round 2, just hours away now as you're listening to this, just hours away from it getting underway. Hope it all goes your way. I hope you cash cow. You're winning in that decision. Your captain does better than Max Gawn did for you last week. But we'll chat to you very soon from all of us here at the Coaches Panel.